Hello, welcome to the Lately in JavaScript podcast, hangout, or whatever we call it. This is episode 64. I'm Manuel Lemos. As always, I have here Arthur Sozins as my co-host, but today we have a special guest, Mark Nadal, that is going to talk to us about an interesting project right after these introductions. First, greeting Artus. Hello, Artus. How cold is it over there in Latvia?
It's getting warmer, and this is what you get for always starting with PHP podcast and not JavaScript.
Yeah, that's true. Today we actually inverted the order of recordings. We always record, at least try to record both in the same day so we can get done with it. But since today we started with JavaScript because we have here Mark and he needs to take a flight soon, we had to record earlier the JavaScript one. So, Mark, how are you doing? Can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah. Hey, thanks for having me on your show. I'm Mark Nadal. I hail from San Diego, California, USA, although currently I'm out in cold Utah mountain area. And then thank you for scheduling early because I got to catch a flight out to Europe in like 2 hours from now. So I'm pretty excited to be on the show. I'm a JavaScript web developer. I kind of have more of a mathematics and logic approach to most things as the background. I dropped out of school, though, to focus on web development because I realized that web development was probably the fastest way that I could take my philosophy and logic and actually like implement something and see if it works rather than just being out in this land of philosophy where you can't really prove too much. I wanted to actually see practical application. So I started building a web design tool called Excelsior several years ago, and that taught me a lot. Everything from jQuery to HTML to CSS, and then at some point I had to learn the back end, and I think that was 2009, and Node.js had just come out, so I stumbled upon that and kind of got into Node.js.
Yeah, that's great. And one curiosity that I have, I suppose, is at least you seem relatively young. You said that you dropped out of school. Well, my son wants to drop out of school. He's just 14. But I said, well, okay, if you start a business, I will not make you go to college. But I suppose even in the US, it's probably more challenging because not everybody can afford the cost of good college. And but you said you dropped out of school because you already were programming and you decided that you wanted to follow that career as soon as possible, or just because school was boring?
Well, I think that's, sorry if I'm a bad influence to your son, but I do think your statement is a fair trade, that if he can figure out how to start a business, then good for him. So for me, I was still in high school and going to community college, which is significantly more affordable than university. And kind of my end goal in life is to become an actual mathematician and be working on like theoretical physics and stuff like that. But yeah, I realize I have to go through decades worth of schooling and go into debt, like a ton of money out here in the US. And the alternative, though, was if you jumped into programming and got good at it enough to have a resume that would make you attractive to companies, you could make a really good wage being a programmer, and you could use that as a step, I think, that would move you faster to your ultimate goal. Now, I ultimately never wound up getting hired by anybody. I have been completely unemployed my entire life, but recently with the project I'm about to show you, which is Gun, it's a JavaScript database. If you have ever used Firebase, it's kind of like Firebase, but there's a couple of differences. I wound up getting VC funding for the database I'm working on. So now I am employed by myself, and I get to work on open source software because Gun is open source, which is pretty cool. So the whole try and start a company as a trade-off for going to school, I think, is hours of your life devoted to it. You'll have to sacrifice your social life and stuff like that. So.
Oh, okay.
VC funding is actually quite impressive.
Sorry, say that again?
VC funding that's actually quite impressive.
Thank you, thank you.
Well, but did you get it already, or you are in the process of reaching there?
Yeah, so I'll give you the story of how that happened. Like I said, I dropped out of school and was trying to run away from universities, but I started working on that web design project. Well, one of my friends who was helping me went to UCLA in California, and UCLA had just started a kind of a school-based accelerator, and we wound up getting accepted into UCLA's program. Now, the interesting thing is I had spent all my time running away from school, but now here's a university that was offering me a grant to work on what I was already interested in. So I couldn't resist, and I accepted it. That was back in 2012, and then I've been working on that web design project for the last 2 years, but I was using a document database for my web tool, MongoDB, and let's just say I had problems with making it not topple over in the middle of the night, which would wake me up and I'd have to go and debug it, figure out what's wrong with my web application, and that was pretty painful. There was a couple other requirements that I'll get into later, but I decided, hey, I'm going to try and build my own database. So I started with Gun, and that quickly got noticed by a accelerator out in San Francisco called Boost VC. They focus primarily on Bitcoin work. However, the guy at Boost VC had gone to UCLA and knew about the startup, so they had found us from that, and so we got into Boost VC, and I went through Boost VC in San Francisco, and that was an incredible experience because at the end of it, not only did they teach me how to set up the legal structure of my company, but at the end of it they had what's called Demo Day, where they introduced me to a ton of investors, one of them being a billionaire that I was able to subsequently raise from. So if it hadn't been for them or the connections that I made that they had, I wouldn't be where I'm at now. So that's kind of the story of how I got VC funding.
So from what I got, you are funded, so you are in the process of figuring out a business model, so you are like burning the investment.
So yes, I'm technical, and everything I do is open source. So it is cool to have investors that are invested in open source. However, there is a bit of a business challenge on that. So we're trying to take the approach that like MongoDB and MySQL and Postgres have taken, which is we release an amazing product that's just free and out there for anybody to use, and then eventually when big corporations jump on the bandwagon, they pay for enterprise support.
Yes, that's interesting, but well, I think probably for our audience it's more interesting to actually know what your product does and how it compares to the existing similar solutions. You already mentioned Firebase, but what can you tell us as an overview of what you are building?
So it's a little bit faster for me to show rather than tell. Now I know that there are people who are going to be listening to this on audio, but I'm going to quickly do a demo. I'm going to switch over to screen share. So I'm going to launch a node server, which I just run by npm start, and this is Gun. And the way you can get it is just npm install Gun. So that starts up a little example app, which I'm going to refresh here. And Gun is going to in real time sync this typing. Okay, so this app right here is about I think 50 lines of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. The actual Gun amount of lines is like 3 or 4, so it's really easy to get real time updates, and that's the comparison to Firebase. But I want to show off something a little bit more interesting, which is, like I said, I had a problem with MongoDB where my database would crash in the middle of the night. I'd have to wake up and be up all night debugging. That got me really, really, really annoyed. So I wanted a database that is fault tolerant. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to crash the server I have right here. I'm going to go one step further. I'm going to delete the data that the server currently has. Now I'm going to switch back to these clients and make conflicting updates on them while they're offline. Now, this is probably the worst nightmare you could be in as a web developer. And if I refresh, you see that the server truly is offline. Because your server is down, you've lost all of your data, and your users are using your system live. But the way I've designed Gun is that it's fully fault tolerant. So if I spin up a new server here, okay, everything is going to recover because I'm using JavaScript. So AA recovered there. And when I spin this guy back up, the data is going to converge to the same view. Did you see that? They all collapse to the BBBBBB update. And that's because since Gun is written in JavaScript, it's able to use the browser as a replica set. So the browsers are actually peers that are interacting with this database. It's not the server alone. So to summarize all those things into the jargon words is that, let me switch back to, is that Gun is real-time, it's peer-to-peer, which means it runs in the browser and it's fault-tolerant. It's offline first, and the thing that I didn't demonstrate, which we can get into later, is that Gun is a graph database, which allows you to do both key-value, document-based database, document-based data, as well as relational or table-based data. So hopefully that wasn't too long, but that was just kind of a quick.
Yeah, no, it's actually very fast. Actually, you jumped to the right to the advantages. It is interesting to know. So it's basically a database system, probably similar to MongoDB and Firebase, but you add some features on the top that make it different. And so now you are trying to figure how you can market it as a product that offers advantages. And this is pretty impressive. I like very much that part of the recovering the data from the browser. Is quite impressive because I would not have had the imagination to figure that solution. But it is interesting. How does it recover all the data from there? How does it work?
So if you're familiar with other databases, there's typically two forms of the data. There is the log, or the journal, or the stream of data. And that's basically an append-only, immutable data structure that just has every update that's ever occurred. But then there's also the snapshot of the data, or the current state of the data. And that's typically what gets flushed to disk. The clever thing about Gun is I actually treat this journal of data and the snapshot of the data as actually being inverses of each other. Okay, so right now in this demo, I don't. The only thing that's getting journaled is the WebSockets that is streaming updates between the server and the client. What the browsers are doing, what the server is doing, is that they're taking the snapshot or the state of the data. So when I wind up recovering the data, it's pretty much the most recent version of the data. However, most recent is a very, very difficult word or phrase when you're dealing with a distributed or peer-to-peer system. So that's an entirely separate discussion. But Gun is designed such that you can have that immutable history of your data, so that way you save every history point historically. I currently haven't written a driver that actually flushes that to disk, but the architecture is set up to both have the journal of the data as well as the state. But in this demo specifically, it is just the state or the snapshot of the data that is seeking and recovering.
So what you've shown us as removing was just what was flushed to disk, not the log of changes, right?
Correct.
So it recovers from the log. So is that what happens?
Sorry, it is recovering from. It is recovering from the most recent snapshot of the data. In the future, the architecture is designed such that you can save the journal or the log of the data, and so you will be able to recover from that too. I just haven't implemented the particular piece that actually saves that to disk versus sending it over WebSockets. But it's an easy piece because it's pretty modular.
Yeah, for you it's an easy to have figured it out. But I'm not going to hold Arthur's because he's making a pretty funny face because he seems to be at least as much impressed as I am.
Yeah. It's exactly, they're actually using each owned local storage in the browser as a replica set is an awesome, mind-blowing feature. I just have some questions. For example, conflict resolution.
Yeah.
We saw that it resolved to the BBB because it was the last thing that you entered in another window, but do you provide any other options like saving the highest score or something like that?
So that is a lots of really interesting discussions there. I'll try and start with a snapshot summary, and then we can dive into whatever depth that you want. So yes, the browser is part of the peer-to-peer system. Gun is a master-master database compared to Firebase, MongoDB, Postgres, MySQL. They're all master-slave. And the way that those databases are able to resolve conflicts is since they're the master, they wind up deciding what is most recent. Okay. Now, since Gun is not master-slave, it is master-master, every peer in the system, the browser, the server, it has a legitimate copy of the data. So how do you resolve conflicts? Well, this works, the kind of the solution that I came up with, for 99% of your needs. However, it's designed to actually be very, very naive, such that you then build for, let's say, different business needs, a different structure on top. And that is simply three things: lexical, vector, timestamp resolution. And for people who aren't familiar with that jargon, I'll give a quick overview. If you use timestamps to determine what is most recent, you have this fundamental problem that if somebody sets the clock on their machine to 2 years in the future, that update is going to win for the next 2 years. That's pretty terrible. That is something you don't want to happen. So vector clocks were introduced in, I think, early 70s to get around this. But the problem with vector clocks is it requires that every peer be known in advance. And that made sense back in the 70s, where you didn't have like the cloud and could spin up 1,000 machines and then shut down 1,000 machines. But it's not very applicable today. However, vector clocks get around that timestamp problem. So I kind of make a hybrid of the two, where I combine the vector relative to the timestamp. Then the last piece is a lexical conflict resolution, which is if two people happen to save an update at the exact same time with the exact same vector, the algorithm just chooses whichever update happens to be lexically largest. Now, that is an algorithm that every machine anywhere in the universe is guaranteed to have, because lexical sorting is just alphanumeric sorting. It's something every machine has to have. So it is rather naive, but it's going to work pretty much everywhere and for 99% of your business needs. However, if you need to get into things like banking and stuff like that, you're not going to want to use this algorithm. Instead, you're going to want to get into fancy words like directed acyclical graphs, which is actually what Git uses, Git version control. Git is fully peer-to-peer, and it uses what's called a directed acyclical graph to take all of your updates and merge them. That sounds like a fancy word, but at the end of the day, if you're familiar with a linked list, that's pretty much what it is. It's just a more complicated version of a linked list. So blockchain technology, directed acyclical graphs, conflict-free replicated data types, CRDTs, those are all fancier algorithms that you can implement on top of the base synchronization of Gun to kind of focus on your specific business needs. And we're going to be implementing those over time for you, so that way you just plug it into Gun. Part of our philosophy is that we don't want your database to be this magical black box, because that's the problem I had before. I want to know what the system is doing, understand its limitations, and actually keep it very, very simple and small, aka the Unix or Node.js philosophy. And then when I want to add more complicated or emergent behavior, I plug those pieces in. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah, that sounds really great. Well, let's discuss a little more about the usage. So I can understand key value, setting key, getting values, and stuff like that. How does the graph come into play?
Yes. Would you rather me talk about this or try and just give a quick demo in code?
Both.
Okay. So I'll first start with talking about. So the interesting things is that there's been this debate between NoSQL and SQL, right, for probably I don't know, half a decade since NoSQL came out, but this debate has been going on for a lot longer than that. But if you actually look at the mathematics of these data structures, is that one is tables are matrices in mathematics, and documents are trees in mathematics. The sweet thing is that both matrices and trees in mathematics can be represented by a graph. Okay? A graph is a superstructure that represents both of those subtypes of data. Now, what's unfortunate is that not every you can't represent any graph with a matrix, and you can't represent any graph with a tree. So they're one way. A graph can represent any table, and a graph can represent any tree, but the inverse is not true. So if you start with your database as being a graph database, you get any data structure you want, because if you're used to having a table, then you just use the graph in a tabular manner. If you're used to having a document or a tree, you just use the graph as a tree or a table. And then the whole key value part is just, that's pretty much just an index. It allows you to quickly access a specific node or object or record in your database. And I can jump over and show some demos if you want.
Yeah, that would be great.
So I'm going to instantiate a new Gun instance.
We don't see your screen, just
That's
need to
right.
turn it first.
Let me switch over to screen share. Thank you for reminding me.
You can just share a specific window instead of all.
Oh, oops. Already messed up. Okay, can you see my text? Okay,
Yeah.
cool. So that's how I instantiate Gun. I'm going to first start with key value. So I'm going to say that I have some ref, and I want to put some node like name Mark Nadal, and I'm going to put a key on it, which is person Mark. Okay? And I'm just getting a warning right now because since I instantiated my database locally, I'm not synchronizing with any other peer. So it's just saying, hey, this data that you're saving is in memory or on this peer only. Now, if I say gun.get person Mark and then .val, which is asynchronous in case it doesn't have the data locally, I get that data back. Right there. See? So that's the key value side. Now, what if I want to put in a doc? Okay? I put in a document. A document's kind of like a simple key value, but it's just many of those things. Let's say name Mark Nadal. Pet is a sub-object. I can format this slightly. So pet is a sub-object in my document. Its name is, let's say, Fluffy, and it has a species of kitty cat, because that's scientific. If I save this, and I then do doc, are you guys still able to see at the bottom of my screen?
Yes, yes.
Okay. If I do doc.val, I'll be able to get back mark console.log that object. I'm going to squish the screen slightly. Are you guys still able to see me?
Yeah,
Right.
see everything.
You see that I got back this object, which has the pet object in it as well. Now, the interesting thing here is if I click to expand this, and I then click to expand pet, you're going to see this really, really weird thing. That is not Fluffy, so you might be frightened at first. What Gun does, because it's a graph database, is it just creates a pointer to the nodes that are in the system. So if I want to then traverse into my document, I can path into the fields of that. So if I go into pet and hit val, I will now get Fluffy. Fluff. Console.log. Fluff. And there you go, I have Fluffy. In fact, I can traverse deeply into my document. Let's say I do doc.path pet.name. Okay? Now val is only going to return just Fluffy. Likewise with species. Okay, kitty cat. there you have the document side of Gun. But what if I want to do some relational stuff? So this is actually pretty cool because I can say I can convert my document into a relational structure. I'm going to path into pet. I'm going to path into a new property of slave, and I'm going to actually, I don't have a reference. I need a reference back to myself. So I'm gonna create my cat slave as being my spouse. Okay. Doc.path pet dot path slave dot put. I'm gonna put my wife here. Name Amber. So now this, if I do doc.path pet dot slave dot val, I should have Amber back. Amber, and I do. Although I just realized that's just showing you how you can make your document deeper and deeper and deeper. I'm going to refresh and start with a new example for the more table or relational stuff. So I'm going to refresh. I'm going to instantiate Gun again. I'm going to just take a regular JavaScript object. And if you guys want to cut me off and ask questions, that's fine. Name Mark McDowell. I'm going to say there Amber is equal to name Amber, and then I'm going to say that mark.spouse, actually for purposes of demonstration, I'm going to say mark.wife is equal to Amber, and amber.husband is equal to Mark. Okay. Now, you're probably used to this with JavaScript. If you want to serialize this object and send it up to your server to save, you're probably going to pass it into json.stringify, right? So you can send it via an AJAX request. However, you get this nasty error, which is you have Mark, which has a property which points to Amber, and Amber has a property which points to Mark. It's circular. JSON cannot handle that. That got really, really annoying. You want to have these relations, but I made that easy enough in Gun. If I do there Mark is equal to gun.put Mark, that data gets saved, and I can now traverse as if it was a document from Mark into wife, as you've seen before. But this is where it's going to get interesting. Amber. I just want to show you that this does work here. Amber. There we have Amber. I can start doing data, a bunch of crazy circular references. The first one, let's say, is just into wife and then into husband. Okay, and that spits me back out. But I can do this endlessly. I can say wife.husband.wife.husband.wife. Okay, and it is able to resolve that correctly. I'm going to do one more thing here, which is I'm going to, after that, path into a new property of PhD, because she's working on her PhD, and I'm going to put true. Okay, I can now retrieve that value back and forth to PhD, and maybe I had I chained it off of husband. I do not have a PhD, so it didn't return any data. However, if I chain it one more time, you see that I do. There is a PhD. However, and this is going to be the last thing I'll stop with, is what if I want to access Amber directly? Well, what I can do is I'm going to path into my wife relative to Mark, and I can set a key on her, person Amber. Okay. Now I can say gun.get person Amber .val data console.log Amber. So now I've created a direct lookup that doesn't require me to jump all the way down a document or go through any circular references. I can go straight to Amber. But the cool thing is because Amber is now keyed, I can also get back to Mark via Amber's key by just going into husband. And there you have it. So I'm going to shut up there. I'm sure that's enough content.
Yeah, so it's all relational, and it's getting resolved. Actually, yeah, that's all quite impressive. Okay, I have a question more about maybe not so technical stuff, but what would be the best applications for this kind of database? Because, well, I can see that there could be some restrictions, maybe with sensitive data not storing on everyone's computer and stuff like that. But maybe you have otherwise a specific application that you think that your database would be the best one to use.
Yeah, let's start with where Gun would not be good, because I think that clears things out first. Gun would not be good for financial banking and stuff like that. And not only for, let's say, the security reasons of the data being synchronized everywhere, but also because you would need to implement on top of my underlying synchronization algorithm a different type of algorithm, which is a commutative replicated data type. We can get into that later, but there winds up being these interesting mathematical properties in the finance world of when you're trying to do additions and subtractions. It's not as simple as just syncing objects. And that's actually what has made the financial industry really, really, really slow and terrible. And hopefully Bitcoin's solving that. So what is Gun good for? Well, the three things that we're kind of focusing on is kind of your standard social network type stuff. So if you're trying to rebuild the next greatest Facebook, you have all these different relations of people, but you probably also want your social network to update in real time with the user's content. So that's a good use case. The second one would be, well, what I'm specifically building Gun for is a collaborative web design app, or any collaborative app, whether that be Google Docs style or spreadsheets. My particular collaborative app that I'm building is a web design tool. So that's what I'm kind of specializing it for. The third category would be web-based gaming. In fact, we have a demo somewhere that's a demo of, it's like a snake-like game of multiple people playing with it. If I post it here, well, I'll post it later maybe. And we just stumbled upon another really good industry, is if you're building like location-based apps, like specifically you're wanting to track your GPS location. So let's take Uber or Lyft, where you want to know where the car is when it comes to pick you up. I'm trying to think of a non-US based example of Uber and Lyft. Gun's really, really good at just saying, hey, we have a key, and the value of that key is your GPS coordinates. And you just update that GPS coordinate nonstop on your phone, and it synchronizes it out to everybody else who's interested in it. In fact, that one, I think you can access it at gps.gundb.io. I'm going to be giving away my location right here. It pops up, and if it loads, that shows you where my location is. And I can come over here and click share, and it gives you a share link. So if you were to go to gps.gundb.io/hash S, capital S, lowercase j, 7, lowercase s, you would be able to see my current location. But I should probably close my window before too many people start spying on me. Did it work?
Yeah. Well, that's pretty impressive. I guess we probably have lots more things to talk about.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we don't have all the time, but it's always interesting to know. Right now, what are your goals for your project? What things do you need? Do you need more collaborators? Do you need more investors? Do you need more customers? What do you need that probably somebody listening could help?
Yeah, we're primarily just spreading the word, and part of spreading the word is just growing the community, getting feedback from more people finding bugs, contributing reports, and building cool projects with it. So that's definitely a must. To be honest, yes, from a business side, and like I said, I'm more technical, so that's what I'm excited about, as you can tell. From the business side, we are now trying to find some pilot customers that we can start getting Gun implemented in their production stack, that they get the value add from it, and then being able to use that in probably 8 or 9 months from now to do some sort of Series A. We raised our seed round from a couple billionaires out here in the USA, Tim Draper, as well as Mark Benioff of Salesforce, and a couple other VC firms that has prominent names. So that was back in early 2014. And so now that we've kind of built out an MVP of the product and we're testing it, we're now kind of trying to move more into the business side. So genuinely, our need is the business and customer side of things, but being technical myself, I get the most excited about just helping people build projects on it because it's all open source and free. You don't have to pay us to use it.
Yeah. Well, that's always interesting. Other than that, is there anything that we did not ask that you probably wanted to tell us?
Sorry, say that again?
Other than these questions, are there anything else that you would have liked that we asked, but for some reason we didn't? Anything that you wanted to share that is important about your project?
Just try it out. If you're Node.js, just type in npm install gun and then cd into that directory and then run npm start, and you'll get the example apps that I showed you earlier. If you are a web developer and you're front-end facing, go to gun.js.org/think.html, and I'll actually, I guess I'm not a screen share. gun.js.org/think.html, and that will give you a front-end focused tutorial on how to build a simple to-do app with Gun in about like 15 minutes. So that's
why not using Bower?
What?
Why not use Bower, for example, for front-end packages?
We do have a Bower installation. I don't know what it is or where it is, but if you go to the repo, which is linked below in JS lately, you'll be able to find it there. But thank you guys for letting me spend so much time of this podcast talking about that. I'm excited to hear about the other subjects we have to talk.
Yes, that was quite interesting. I'm sure that the audience will appreciate. Now we are going to move on to other topics, and I'll invite you to also comment on them, because it's always interesting to listen to other opinions besides mine and Archer's, as always. Okay, so we are going to start precisely by a topic here. Let's share the screen, which is about what features are expected for ECMAScript 2017. Now the version numbering of JavaScript and ECMAScript got even more confusing because they are tying the numbers of the years. This is yet another nice article by Dr. Axel Raschemeyer, and it basically tells about things that are features that are currently staged for ECMAScript. It mentions that for ECMAScript 2016 was finalized, I mean the feature set, and he talks about some things that will be very likely in ECMAScript 2017. And he mentions here, I'm not sure if we've talked about this. SIMD.js is actually it details it a bit here. I think this is a sort of operating with numbers that maps better what the CPUs do. So the eventual translation to the native CPU instructions will eventually be simpler and faster.
Yeah, so basically you have a list of the variables that you have of the same type, and you can apply the same operation to all of them, I think in one CPU operand it would be. And that would probably allow speeding up things. I think something similar is already available, or at least emulated in AwesomeJS and what Emscripten uses. So it would be more standardized API to access that, or maybe even underlying approach would also be changed to make it even more faster.
Yes, I guess that's the sort of the secret of making it faster. Especially those games that were ported from C++ with Emscripten, right?
Yeah, Emscripten, your favorite tool, I remember.
Yeah, it hasn't been a while we did not comment Emscripten, because some time ago everything was Emscripten. Basically all ports of C++ things in the past?
JavaScript's performance is very, very interesting. I've been working on measuring like a lot of just simple things like function calls, addition, and you'd be surprised about how easy it is to destroy JavaScript performance. I'm hoping to publish it as an article at some point. The thing that I really, really want to see in the future of JavaScript, though, is macros. I find it interesting that they went to all this effort to implement like classes and stuff like that. But if they implemented just macros, it would be really, really easy for anything like classes to be added with macros. But unfortunately, they haven't added macros yet.
It would be like C macros, or
So you would include or exclude portions of the code on the runtime depending on what browser or processor or something they have. Do you mean like that?
No, I mean macros where you're able to define new syntax in your source code, and then the interpreter is able to generate that structure. So you could do a macro for classes.
I see. Yeah, okay.
Is it similar to something that there is now in PHP, which is traits?
I don't know PHP well enough. I know macros is much more on like the functional side of programming, so I'm pretty sure Haskell and...
Well, in PHP, traits are like you define code, which will be functions or variables, and then you can define a class that and say use this trait, and it automatically uses code defined in that trait. And this is used, for instance, let's say that you want to have a singleton pattern in many of your classes. You define a single trait that defines the singleton code, and then in the classes just say use this, and you can use in as many classes as they want. The code itself is not even aware that it is going to be part of a class. Is it more like that, or maybe something different?
That sounds like it's closer. I'd have to look into it, but yeah, it is much closer to that line of reasoning where you say that and it generates it for the rest. But I don't know enough to be able to say yes or no.
Okay. Well, anyway, there are other features that you mentioned that has been staged, async functions. I'm not sure. Is this async and await? Probably. Because I thought it would be have been defined before.
With the generators and await?
Async and await.
Yeah.
It's like...
you don't have to have a callback for asynchronous function, you just put a async keyword and await for it to return the value without a callback.
Yeah, it's making asynchronous code look like synchronous. Except it will still be synchronous, but I think it's probably this. Then there is object values or object entries. I'm not sure what is this. It's probably make objects look like arrays.
I think what it does, are you guys familiar with object.keys, which winds up being, I'm pretty sure object.values is the same thing as object.keys, except for it does it for the values in it. I'm not sure exactly, but one of my engineers...
Makes sense, yeah, it makes sense. Basically, it's the entry. Oh yeah, and the entries would return both probably key value mappings.
Yeah, then it talks about string padding. This is probably one of those functions just to actually fill up a string with certain characters. Trailing commas and function parameters, and lists and calls. Oh, this is something that is being discussed in PHP as well. I don't know why people want this, but just putting commas at the end of a list of values, like in function calls, even if there are no more parameters right after that. And then get own property descriptors. This I'm not familiar with. Arthur, do you know this? Get own property descriptors.
Well, no, I haven't heard about this one yet. looking through the article, it would return, basically would describe a project that probably would allow to console log an object more easily, not just stringify it, because as we might do. And
Oh, I see.
Okay.
Okay, I guess somebody has a use case for this. I don't remember anything particular that I would use, but okay. Uh, okay, this is always interesting because it seems JavaScript is getting as complex as we can see, and I don't know. For me, I will always use the basic JavaScript that I know. I'm not a big fan that using new constructs, given that probably not all implementations already have it enabled. But that's just me, not necessarily what every other developer wants.
I agree with you. I feel like JavaScript is just becoming bloated unnecessarily.
It's not just JavaScript. I think there is a competition between languages, which one steals more features from the others. Because whoever gets more features wins the argument of the best language.
yeah, because the same thing is happening basically to PHP too. There are lots of proposals to add such features, which we could live without it, but
Yeah, exactly. Actually, we are going to record the pitch being out later, and we have yet another batch of discussion
proposals.
of features that you are not even sure why somebody wants that, but then you realize, oh, he wants that because somebody said that the other language has it. And okay. Anyway, well, moving on to the next topic, we're just commenting briefly here an interesting article about creating single-page applications with WordPress and AngularJS. WordPress is basically a PHP application. Despite there was a recent developments to make it. Yeah, well, it's not hoax. After all, the WordPress people, I mean, those that run the WordPress.com use it. But in the end, they end up calling the PHP code. Anyway, since WordPress is if not the most popular, it is the very popular platform, at least for blogging, and then they have plugins for everything else, and so it turns WordPress into many things. But WordPress is mostly a platform for retrieving pages from the server. But when you want to develop more fluent, more usable applications, you end up developing applications that access the server the least as possible. So they do as much as possible in the browser. And there is an article here that teaches you how to integrate, actually develop how I'm not sure if those are plugins or just new types of pages that would
it's more of a set of the plugins that would transform your blog into a single-page application using the REST API plugin to retrieve data and providing AngularJS on the front end to serve it in different views. So
yes, this is always interesting because people want to do more with the WordPress. I realize that there is people that uses WordPress but is not really happy with it because most of the programming of WordPress is done with a global code, lots of global functions calling, not really objects. That is the kind of model that somewhat WordPress got stuck. But since you have to deal with it, as long as it works, for many people it's fine. And here they just present how can it lots of JavaScript code for the integration. And for those that are interested, just comment about this briefly. Okay.
Just a quick note, I do know that WordPress has released Calypso, which I think, I'm not sure exactly, I think it is a JavaScript
Yeah.
version of WordPress.
Yeah, yes, that's
So,
what I was mentioning first. We commented about it like a few shows ago. It's basically an implementation that is used by the WordPress.com site. WordPress.com is a sort of installation of the WordPress project, and they say that they are using Node.js and other things to communicate with the core that in the end it's still PHP. Which it's sort of like JavaScript calling an API. So parts of the things are nowadays on WordPress running on JavaScript, Node.js, but still the core is still based on PHP. Not that they did not want it to get rid of it, but it's probably difficult. Um, they also have built like I would say, sort of instance of sets of plugins that they can enable for those people that are not developers and use WordPress.com. And for them, it's irrelevant whether it is in PHP or JavaScript, as long as that structure is working well for their purposes. And from what I could gather, it was more about scaling the platform, because WordPress.com has many blogs, and their needs are different from the regular developer that has one blog or just a few blogs there. So that is why they seem to have developed that. Okay, so moving on. I'm going to actually just comment this briefly, because we just realized that this yet another article about people being in a fatigue due to the excessive number of options that they have in JavaScript. And this article by Dr. Axel Rauschmeier just gives some advice and how to deal.
Not to stress out, yeah.
yeah, I love his joke about JavaScript fatigue.
Yeah.
He's tired of everyone having fatigue, yeah.
Yeah. Yes, because it's getting recursive. And well, it just gives some advice to relax. Just say, don't try to know everything, even because you don't have time. You just cannot catch up on that ever. Here in this podcast, you try to cover some interesting topics, but it's pretty impossible to cover everything that is coming out. And then he mentions also that you should wait for the critical mass, like waiting for a project to get some mainstream adoption. Don't just jump on something that just arrived.
Except for Gun.
Oh, no, but as you said, if you started it in 2014, it didn't just arrive.
That's true. We got like over 1,500 stars, but
Okay, that's quite a bunch of stars, and you shouldn't complain.
I'm not.
Yeah, and also suggests to stick to things that you understand.
Yes.
He's just suggesting you don't understand everything. Deal with it, and I would say stick to things that you actually need. Don't try to understand everything just because it is there. Then he also do exploratory type projects. Well, that could be if you have time and maybe purpose for that. And diversify in life. Specializing is good, but it's also good to have regular activities not related to tech. Like this seems more other type of advice, not just to be applied to JavaScript fatigue. And well, basically, this is just common sense of things that you do. You should not be stressed out because of this overwhelming a bunch of information of projects and JavaScript technologies that you are coming out very with a greater frequency, even more than in the past. And okay, now moving.
I have probably
Sorry?
a controversial view on this. I actually like it a lot, and to me, it's similar to how PHP grew. You had all these really complicated languages, but then PHP came out with it just being like dead simple. Like anybody could get their hands on it and start playing with it, and that's what happened, and PHP exploded. Not necessarily because PHP was a good language, but because it democratized server programming to the masses. And I think JavaScript does kind of the same thing. And so the reason why we have all these new projects and libraries coming out all the time is because anybody can get into this stuff, which is really exciting, and then build the next coolest thing. And sure, as a result, you know, people do for learning processes and they start their projects. But it can be tiring, but I ultimately think it's a good thing because it's opening the community up. It's growing the community, and it's allowing more people to learn how to program. So that's my view on it.
Yeah, PHP actually grown out of need of many people, not only because it solved the web problem, but also solved the job problem. Many people got jobs starting precisely with PHP. Many did not even have a background in programming, and as you said, it democratized programming because it's that simple language.
Yeah.
But not everybody just want to go there and learn everything about PHP. They just learn what they need. Some people, just like there are jQuery programmers, there are WordPress programmers. And outside of WordPress, probably people get a bit lost. They would probably not be able to develop with some popular frameworks because they have not learned about them, and just sticking with WordPress is already plenty of business for them. Okay, but moving on to another article that is somewhat related with another that we commented this time. Is just an article presenting a question: should the future of JavaScript be developer-driven? I think so. Well, that is my bottom line. I think if many of these technologies and features of the language are just being developed just because they can and not being used so much, probably all the effort to implement these features will be forgotten because not everybody will use those features that are being added to the language. I don't know what you guys think.
Well, I think every new feature added should solve some specific case or some specific problem that either it is writing a lot of code to solve this problem and it provides a shortened function to do it, or it's a problem that is not so simple to solve, but add additional functionality that would solve it, like threading or something like that. So I usually don't like stuff that adds only sugar syntax and makes me more functions to remember in the end. But again, for example, the same methods includes or contains, like mentioned in the article, if they run natively, they might be faster than I wrote them polyfills in the JavaScript. And the article is actually also mentioning about how to name them, which style to take from other languages or develop a unique style according to JavaScript, and there are lots of questions when implementing them, and it's hard to have an answer for all of them.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, because over here it talks about a few functions that are being added, but apparently they are like aliases to existing functions. And he actually asks, should he break the web because of naming preferences? Yes, and this personally, I don't like because it is not going to add anything except more complexity and confusion. But okay, that's just my way of viewing it.
I agree with you.
Yeah. So great. Let's move on to an article. This is quite an interesting topic. Not that we have much to say, but it's just a curiosity, something that is being happening, which is about the Visual Studio Code IDE developed by Microsoft that above everything it works on Linux. And Linux used to be the enemy of Microsoft. And although they say first they deny it, I forgot the whole the whole synthesis. In the end, Linux wins. And well, it's not exactly Linux that is winning. It's just Microsoft that is adapting their
And
strategy to the reality.
it's actually should be appreciated that Microsoft is adapting to that, and they are like making the first steps.
Yeah, well, they are not stupid. They certainly are favoring some business goal. They are not just trying to please the Linux crowd just because Linux is great. It's certainly because it's something in line with their business goals. And just this week, I heard that Microsoft is launching a SQL Server for Linux.
Yeah.
And actually, I asked a few friends why now, and they basically said that many corporate, uh, the corporate market uses Windows for desktops and also for servers, but they also like Linux because they can scale to a bunch of machines without the cost of licenses that Windows would impose. So they are developing SQL Server for Linux to make it run on the Linux machines that those customers that they have are already using. Well, I'm not sure if this will work well for them, but okay, they should know what they are doing.
I'm
So
actually pretty excited about Code Visual Studio. It looks really nice. I haven't played with it yet, but it looks
yeah,
really nice.
it's like every one of us that oh, I like the idea, but I did not try it.
No, I actually tried it. I think we already commented in some podcast about it. There are things
Yeah.
that I like. That mostly it's not like it can be not only project based but a directory based to simply load the file and edit it. There are some things I didn't like for example, to make it work with Node.js, you need to enter specific comment in your file to load the JS IntelliSense. And I just thinking if every developer would use their own editing tool that would need to require to add their own comments for IntelliSense, it would bloat the file a lot and stuff like that. But actually, and oh no, it was quite nice.
Yeah. So
Specific-
did you
yeah.
get and did you understand what is introducing Chrome debugging for VS Code? Is it
Yeah.
like a remote debugging?
Yeah, basically Chrome have a debugging protocol in their browser and everyone can connect to it. And basically they made a connection from Visual Studio, so you can run it directly in your Chrome and get debug information in your Visual Studio.
Yeah. So,
Good to
well,
see that they're doing it for Chrome, not for Internet Explorer.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
that's just because they did not port Internet Explorer yet to
That's
Linux. Well, it's not even called Internet Explorer anymore. They call it Edge because Internet Explorer was already a bad name. Yeah,
generally
but
speaking, I'm excited at where Microsoft is going. I think they're opening up a lot.
Yeah,
yeah.
completely agree.
Well, just the question, what took them so long? Anyway, I don't know if they're arriving late to the party. Well, Arthur, did you actually try this or just look at?
I just took it from the article, did not try, but I remember something about the Chrome and debugging protocol, and yeah, they are using it exactly.
Okay, but would it be better than the actual debugging support inside Chrome? Somehow.
It would be the same, basically the same, I think. Yeah, only it would be in your development environment that you are using, so
okay.
maybe a little more handy. And combining that you have a code editing there, it would be easier as it would show the error in that file that you can already edit and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, okay. I'm sure there is always people that find good uses for all this. So moving on with the next topic,
I'm gonna butt in right here. I need to leave in 15 minutes to catch my plane, so I'm gonna get off now. Really appreciate you guys having me on. It's been fantastic, and have a great rest of the podcast.
Yeah, well, if you need to leave, that is okay. We are just finishing the last topic.
Oh, okay.
So it will be less than 15 minutes, I'm sure. Anyway, the next topic is just comment briefly about this project that they say it's for virtualization of x86 machines that would use the x86 processors. So this now can not only run Linux, but it can also run other OSs for which they have images here. There is even Windows 1.1 that they can run, and it loads pretty fast. Not that we are excited with the concept, but
this is mind-blowing. This is mind-blowing.
Yes, and just to say where we are in the JavaScript world, now we can run full virtual machines in JavaScript, so you can run all this in the browser, and it is interesting just to see that well, people are using this just because they can, not because they really want to.
Yeah.
So that was just a curiosity. And now moving on to another topic, which is just comment briefly about a feature that was implemented both in PHP classes and JS classes. It is a feature that will allow developers that are looking for recommendations of packages. Ideally, when you are looking for a package for a purpose, you would ask advice to a colleague that could give you the advice based on his knowledge. But sometimes those colleagues are not there, and you need to fast advice. And in the PHP classes site, like in 2014, it was implemented a feature that is a recommendation system where you can go and you can ask for advice. Let me just pause it here and just show quickly what the system has. For instance, you would go here, and there are people asking for advice. Then some people can come and give advice for these packages. So what was implemented now was just the possibility, just for instance, if you want XML parser, just type the search. Now you can see results both from packages that exist here and recommendations. So here we can see the 3 top recommendations out of 5. And then you look at the recommendations and see if that is matching what your problem. If you're looking, for instance, for RSS parser or some other type of parser, you would look at these recommendations. You can see all of them at once here, and you would actually go there and get a recommendation. The advantage of this is that instead of looking at all of these 85 packages that exist on a site for a parsing XML site, you would actually see recommendations from real users that suggested those packages. Then you can go there and check if the recommendation is about for the same thing that you want, and if it is fine, you can try use it yourself. So the idea is to reduce the time that you need to spend researching for something that you need. So I'm talking about is here in the JavaScript podcast, because in the JS classes site there is also that feature. The only thing is that since the JS classes site is much smaller, there are not so many recommendations. There are already a few, not many, unfortunately, because the JS classes site is not so popular. But for instance, if you go here and ask for search for camera, you will see all these recommendations. I mean, all these packages, and then there is one recommendation here. Well, that's basically it. There is actually a tutorial video explaining this in more detail, also suggesting people how they can help making this sort of knowledge base better, because you would answering recommendation requests or posting new recommendation requests, the whole knowledge base of recommended package would be naturally evolved. Well, that's basically regarding this function. So the last topic that we want to comment here is just to comment that Anders Toth was the winner of the Innovation Award, and it was announced last month. But recently he gave an interview to talk a bit more about himself, also talk about what he did, the package that he did. There is some information of the final rankings of the winners last year. And since he already got his prize, okay, I know there is a PHP prize over there, but he still appreciates it. Because many JavaScript developers are also PHP developers. And then he's showing these two trophies that he won, one for being the winner and another for being from the winning country for the ranking by countries. So it tells a bit about himself, but that is basically it. And this is just a reminder for other developers to come and submit their packages so they can be nominated, and you can also win nice prizes and actually be rewarded for your participation.